grateful to all of you for being in attendance so that we can talk about education, but the only way to really talk about it is by way of addressing the budget problems that we have in South Dakota. There are two distinct kinds of governors in the history of South Dakota. There are governors who have been caretakers, who have presided over the state, who took office without a great deal of an agenda, without strong ideas about what they wanted to do. And then there's another kind, a strong leader type of governor. You've heard me talk about this before, but as election day draws closer, you will see clearer and clearer examples of those two styles. One a caretaker and one a strong leader. We're here to talk about education and the budget in the context of those two very different styles. But the first thing we have to do is set the stage for why we are here. We need to address a serious problem in South Dakota. The problem is twofold. It is a budget deficit that is nearing the strangulation point for South Dakota, and it is a failure to invest in education, which also has dire consequences. First of all, we need to understand that as between the two people running for governor of South Dakota, one is a denier of the facts that face us. In fact, you'll remember this letter from April 14, 2010. The Lieutenant Governor said, in specific reference to me, that I have a problem because there is no budget crisis in South Dakota. 10% of the revenue stream in next year's budget will be needed to retire just the $107 million deficit that this administration will hand me when I take office in January. If that's not a budget crisis, I don't know what is, but I have a specific plan to deal with it. But let's look at it in the context of what has happened to education. And I've said before that this administration has seen to the dismantling of public education in the state of South Dakota. What do I mean? Well, I mean this, that just in the 8 years that they have been in office, the percentage of the budget in the state of South Dakota directed toward K-12 education has slumped from 38.4% to 30.9%. When I hear this administration talking about their plans for the future of education, I can only assume that that arrow will continue to point downward. There are no plans to stop its descent, and this administration has made it clear that other priorities in state government are more important. This is a crisis in South Dakota that begs to be addressed. The problem is clear no matter how you analyze it. In South Dakota, as we know, education funding is a three-legged stool. The federal government does a better job funding K-12 education in South Dakota than either of the other two legs of the stool. In fact, the last statistic I saw suggests that we are sixth per capita in terms of federal funding for K-12 public education in South Dakota. The second leg of the stool is your local property taxpayers. Those local property taxpayers do a really great job in supporting public K-12 education in South Dakota. In fact, the last statistics I saw suggest that we are 24th, right in the middle of the country in terms of local effort by property taxpayers. Where does the state of South Dakota fall? State aid to K-12 education, the third leg of the stool. We are dead last. And we have been dead last for years. Now, this is unacceptable to a strong leader running for governor. It is unfortunately acceptable to a caretaker type of governor, and that is the crisis facing South Dakota. So how do these two very different types of leaders address the problem that we're facing? Well, you heard from the Lieutenant Governor yesterday. This is what's called the Dugard Plan for Education. This is nothing more than a plan for a press conference. There were no substantive changes to speak of in this plan. There is a suggestion that there will be an emphasis on science, but I suggest to you that a governor who denies global warming even exists is not going to motivate the children of this state to enter careers in science. In fact, there are only two substantive changes in this so-called plan. One of them would repeal the requirement that school districts with fewer than 100 census must be closed. That, of course, is a position that I've taken since it was first floated as an idea in Pierre. But it's an idea that this administration supported. This administration supported that minimum census. Only as of yesterday did the Lieutenant Governor change his mind about that. The only other substantive change in this plan deals with the surpluses that school districts should be allowed to maintain. And as you know, I have long since been a strong believer that local control means that you will decide what those surpluses are. As I've said to the governor personally, if you want to run the school boards of the state, run for the school board, not for governor of South Dakota. We have outstanding leadership in our school districts that can be trusted to make those decisions. But you know, every year in the State of the State message in Pierre, the governor, with the lieutenant governor sitting right behind him, spoke about how awful our school districts were for having surpluses in the bank. In fact, they had charts showing all of the surplus dollars that school districts had in the bank. Only as of yesterday did the lieutenant governor change his mind, and I know of no evidence to suggest that he ever advocated within this administration the position he now takes as of 24 hours ago. A caretaker governor, a person who's interested in just that sort of hands-off, back-away role, is content with the status quo. When I read through this, the one thing that came back to me again and again is that the future will not change if we elect Dennis Daugaard. The future will not change. In fact, this arrow will continue to descend. We're at 30.9 now. That's the percentage of K through 12 of the overall state budget. Where will we be in 4 years under the same leadership that we have seen from the lieutenant governor and the governor? I suggest to you that that can only go downward as they continue to believe that other priorities in state government are more important. Well, what is our plan for education? First of all, as I've said, we must deal with the budget problem. We must change priorities in South Dakota, and that means changing the budget. Why does it need changing? Total FTE growth in the state of South Dakota since they took office has gone from 12,952 state employees to 14,465 in a state with the population of Toledo, Ohio, in a state whose population has not grown significantly during that same period of time. And these are not school teachers. These are not the folks in the school districts in the state of